at this time, we'll open our Bibles to the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter number 4. Ezekiel chapter number 4. Won't go into a great deal of review. The first 3 chapters are online. You can go on our website and kind of catch up in case maybe you missed some of those things. But it has been a couple of weeks, and so I do want to remind you that chapters 1 through 3 is pretty much the call of the prophet. Remember, he sees God. He's very humbled, and God calls him to deliver a message to the children of Israel. And one of the things that God says as he closes out chapter number 3 is he was going to use Ezekiel in kind of a different way. Some of the prophets, you think of guys like Jonah, where he says, I want you to go out and just openly declare a message. Well, Ezekiel wasn't going to do that. He said, first of all, you're not going to be able to just go out and publicly proclaim things. If somebody wants to come to your house, you can deal with them there. Otherwise, what he's going to do is he's going to use him to kind of act out different plays and different things as visual illustrations to teach the children of Israel the messages that he had for them. You think of Hosea is another type to where that happened. Remember, he said, I want you to go and marry a prostitute. I mean, what a picture there. And that would picture the children would be a message as far as how your relationship is with the Lord. And so here, as we get into chapter number 4, we're going to see some of those things. But let's begin here. Verse number 1. He says, Thou also, son of man. Now, it's been a couple of weeks, so I want to remind you here, when we see that phrase, we often think of the Lord Jesus Christ as a messianic title. And the reason the Lord took on that title was to identify with humanity. He had to become a man to pay the price for our sin. The reason it's placed upon Ezekiel here is to show his frailty. It means son of the dust is what it means. He's kind of reminding him that he is frail. You think of the psalmist. He says, What is man that thou art mindful of him? Or the son of man that thou visitest him? He points out the fact that we're just dust. And Ezekiel was going to have a very difficult job, and so he needed God's strength to do it. And so he says, Thou also, son of man, take thee a tile, and lay it before thee, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. And so he says, here's one of these things that he's going to act out. Okay, I want to give people a visual illustration of the message that I'm going to deliver to them. Now, remember, there were false prophets that were saying, hey, we're God's chosen people. We need to rise up. We need to rebel. God will deliver us. That wasn't God's plan. God had them in captivity for a reason. They refused to follow his commands for 490 years, so they owed him 70 years. And they kept going against what it was that God had for them. And so, for 2 times already, they had come up against the children of Israel. They took Jeremiah into captivity. In the second deportation, they took Ezekiel into captivity. And the third deportation was going to be the destruction of Jerusalem. But I want to lay out this picture. It's going to be a difficult message for you to deliver. But I want you to take the tile, and I believe what it's referring to here is some sort of soft clay tablet that could be written on or drawn upon. They would use it for writing, and you can actually in museums see some of those things that they would take and write upon. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to lay it out before you, and I want you to portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. So he's going to focus his message on Jerusalem. We get chapters 4 through 24 approximately, are going to deal with the destruction of Jerusalem that was about to take place. And so he says, we're going to set this as an illustration before the people. And he says in verse 2, and lay siege against it. Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot to us. For the most part, we don't really get it. We don't really understand it. Once you take a little bit of time to understand siege warfare during this time period, that should send a little bit of chills down your spine. And they would encircle the city. They would close it off. Nobody can go out. Nobody's coming in. And basically what they would do is they just wait out the inhabitants of the city for the most part until they starve to death. And you can read in the Old Testament about times where mothers were boiling and eating their children. It got so bad. I mean, so when you hear that word siege, there's a little bit of horror that is associated with it. And he says, I want you to lay siege against it and build a fort against it and cast a mound against it. Set the camp also against it and set battering rams against it round about. And it's almost like, I want you to play army toys here a little bit. And use your toys to kind of act this out. I remember growing up, my brother and I, we had a whole bunch of G.I. Joes. Not the big tall ones that were actually dolls in disguise, But they were action figures. That's what we call them, so they weren't dolls. But we sit here and we had all kinds of the ships and the vehicles and the forts and everything else, and we would make our own forts and stuff and kind of build out and have these war sets and everything else, and we'd spend hours doing that, playing outside with them and everything else. And basically what he tells Ezekiel here is, I want you to play war a little bit. And we're going to build a fort here, we're going to build up Jerusalem, and we're going to put some walls and different things around it, and I want you to set up these soldiers all around it, these battering rams and other things that are going to come up against it. And basically you're going to put on a little play for people to be able to see what I'm going to do to the city of Jerusalem. He says, moreover, take thou unto thee an iron pan, and that would be a flat thing for baking. I want you to take this iron pan and set it for a wall of iron between thee and the city, and set thy face against it, and it shall be besieged, and thou shalt lay siege against it. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel. And here we see that there was going to be no way out of this. Once the siege comes, you're trapped in that city for the most part. There would be those, when the siege actually came, that would try to escape, and they were hunted down, chased down, and caught and killed. But he pointed out the fact that, I want you to set up this iron pan. It's going to be like an iron wall, and no one's going to be able to escape. It's going to be a sign, a picture for the house of Israel. And so that's one of the things that he wanted him to do as an illustration. Now he's got something else that he wants him to do as an illustration. And all throughout Ezekiel's ministry, he's got to act out these certain things. To the point there were people that thought that he actually had some sort of mental problems when they read about everything that he did. I don't believe so. God had a lot that he wanted to deliver to the people. But beginning in verse 4, he says, lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it. According to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. So he says, here's what I want you to do. First of all, I want you to lay on your left side. And so, as we see here, he's going to have a certain amount that he wants him to do this. Then he's going to lay on his right side. And the reason he has him lay on which side is determinant on the facing the sunrise. So when you face the sunrise, if you're standing and you're facing the sunrise, on your left would be the nation of Israel. On your right would be the nation of Judah. Remember, they were a divided kingdom. And so when he talks about laying on your left side, that's symbolic of the nation of Israel. And then he's going to have them lay on their right side, being symbolic of Judah. And he says that it's going to be according to the number of the days, and thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. So because of their sins and what they've done, there's a certain number of days that I want you to lay on your left side. And he says, verse 5, for I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of days. 390 days, so shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. Now, he says, for 390 days, I want you to lay on your left side. Now, I don't think that it was continuous for 390 days. You'll read some commentaries that talk about that, and it's a possibility. But as you read what's going on here, there's other things that he wanted him to do at this same time. So it seems like it wasn't 24 hours a day for 390 days he's laying on his left side, but for office hours, so to speak. For a certain amount of time every day, he would go out in front of the people, lay on his left side as a picture that God was going to have for him. So, for 390 days, they're going to do this. And there is some question about, why 390 days. And you can do some digging in Jeremiah chapter number 52 and look into the siege of Jerusalem. Lasted for about 18 months. But you'll notice in Jeremiah chapter 37 that for part of that, the army of Pharaoh comes up, and those who are besieging Jerusalem leave for 5 months. So about 13 months you have this siege taking place. 30 days a month, 390, that's the way that some people look at it and why that 390 days. There is some questions about that, but that is one possibility. And seems to be very fitting, considering the picture that he just had him portray in verses 1 through 3 about the siege of Jerusalem. But he says, the reason this is happening is because of the iniquity of the house of Israel. We're going to kind of lay these things in front. And so he says, and when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. And so he tells him that once you've accomplished that, you've laid on your left side for 390 days, now I want you to lay on your right side for 40 days. And you're going to bear the iniquity of the house of Judah. And you notice what he says, and he says, I have appointed thee each day for a year. Now, in the Hebrew, it actually says a day for a year, a day for a year. It's there twice. And I believe the reason behind that is to understand that a day for a year for the 390, a day for a year for the 40. And so you have a total of 430 days representing 430 years. A day for a year is not the rule. And the only other time we see that taking place is in Kadesh Barnea. Remember the 40 days they searched out the land. He says you're going to wander in the wilderness a day for a year. And so they spent some approximate 40 years, and actually it was 38 years wandering around in the wilderness. And so just note that's not necessarily the rule, but at very distinct times God establishes that for a purpose. And so each of these days would represent a year. And at a later time we'll discuss the possibility of this, why 430 years. But for time's sake, we'll continue on here tonight. He says, therefore thou shalt set thy face towards the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. And so he's going to prophesy against Jerusalem, which is not a popular message. As I mentioned before, there were false teachers that were saying, hey, we are God's chosen people. We need to rise up. We need to rebel and throw off, and God will deliver us. But that wasn't the message God had for his people. He was to cry against Jerusalem, cry against the children of Israel and the house of Judah. And he says, and behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. So one of the things that he points out is that as he's laying there for everybody to see him, he had some sort of restraints on him to make sure that people understood he was not able to turn over. So he's fast and set and secure while he's laying there on the left side for 390 days. He's fast and set and secure, so he's only on his right side for those 40 days. So it's not that people are walking by and saying, well, he's on his left side now, maybe he was on his right side a while ago. As soon as you saw him, you understood he could not turn over. He couldn't switch sides. God wanted to make it very clear. And so he says that's the way it's going to be until we've ended the days of the siege. Now, he says, take thou also unto thee wheat, and barley, and beans, and lentils, and millet, and fitches, and put them in one vessel, and make thee bread thereof, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon thy side. 390 days shalt thou eat thereof. And so, a millet is a type of grass that grows and matures without rain, and then those seeds are grounded and mixed with others to form breads and things for the poor. And I had written down here what fitches was. It's another thing kind of like rye, I think, remembering off the top of my head. But the idea is that they would mix all these together, which you wouldn't normally do. You would normally eat all of one kind. When you mix them together, that's a sign of poverty. That means you don't really care what it is you're throwing in the bowl. You're just happy to have something to eat. I remember growing up, there was a time where my mom went out of town. She would go out of town often. There was a time my mom went out of town, and so Dad was watching us, and there's certain things my dad is really good at cooking. He can fry fish and certain things, but he's not a chef. And I remember, and my brother and I still talk about this, that while my mom was gone, he grabbed some tortilla shells, he went into the fridge with whatever was in there, threw it in the tortilla shell, and made us burritos. And it was one of the most awful things that you have seen or smelled in your entire life. And I remember him saying, listen, and we were like, we don't want to eat this. We'll go without supper tonight. That's fine. It's not going to kill us. And he's like, no, you're going to eat this. And then he said, well, if you eat it, you can stay up, we'll play video games and so on and so forth. If you don't eat it, you're going to go to bed. And you're probably going to get a spanking. And so we're like, well, that's fine. I guess we're going to bed tonight because I don't want to eat this thing. And what got me was secret option C. Secret option C was you're going to eat it anyway, get a spanking, and then go to bed. But mixing everything all together. That's exactly what they're doing here. This is not some fine dish that they're pouring together. We're poor. We're starving because of the siege. We're gathering together whatever we can gather together, grinding it up so we can make something to eat. And he says, and thy meat, verse 10, which thou shalt eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From time to time shalt thou eat it. Now, I believe that's somewhere around 8 ounces a day they're having. And you're going to have 8 ounces of bread a day to eat. And he says, thou shalt drink also water by measure, the 6th part of a hin from time to time shalt thou drink. And I think that's about 1.5 pints a day. And there is some differences on those measurements, but just to give us somewhat of an idea. So it's not very much to drink, not very much to eat, symbolizing the starvation that they would face and the famine they would face during the siege. He says in verse 12, and thou shalt eat it as barley cakes, and thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. Now, this isn't what you first think when you read it. He's not mixing the human waste with the barley and making patties to eat. What he's doing is he's using the human waste and mix it with straw, and they would use it as a fuel for cooking, which was against their dietary restrictions. You could not do that. In fact, Deuteronomy makes it very clear in chapter number 23, verses 12 through 14, it says, thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad, and thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back, and cover that which cometh from thee. For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he sees no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. And so it was very clear they were to go without the camp. He wanted things to be very clean, because obviously we know now that human waste and all that causes disease and sickness and death and everything else. And so he said you need to make sure you do that without the camp. And so cooking with it was absolutely forbidden. Something you just did not do. And but he says, I want you to use that as fuel to cook the barley cakes. And he says, and the Lord said, even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them. And so, once again, this is a picture. This is to illustrate the fact that, hey, you want to live like a lost nation? You want to live like the Gentiles? I'm going to scatter you out. You're going to eat your defiled bread among the Gentiles. And just as he was going to have to eat this defiled bread that he would make. And then said I, so Ezekiel prays to the Lord. He says, Ah, Lord God, behold, my soul hath not been polluted. For from my youth up, even till now, have I not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth. And so here he's talking about a ceremonial uncleanness, and he says in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, points out all those different laws and different things that they had as far as what they were supposed to follow, these dietary restrictions and how they prepare food and store it and everything else. And he says, from the time that I was a youth, because remember, he was a priest that was called to be a prophet. And so he was raised in this very strict sense of keeping the law. And he said, I did not eat anything which died of itself. You couldn't just walk upon something that died and eat it. It had to be killed in a very certain way. And today they follow kosher laws and different things like that. And he says, I've not eaten anything that's died of itself, nothing that was killed or torn in pieces. And he says, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth. And that's referring to food that was offered to idols. And he says, so far, that's not happened. And so he's crying out for the Lord to kind of give him a pass on this one. Lord, I know what you want me to do, but please, I have not, to this point, defiled myself in that way. Now, it reminds me of Acts chapter number 10. Turn over to Acts chapter number 10. We talk about dietary laws and the ceremony of it and all those types of things. It reminds me of Acts chapter number 10 here. And Peter has this vision, and which was a picture of something far greater than just food to eat. Acts chapter number 10, beginning in verse number 9, says, On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. He became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. So while they're making some food, he gets this vision, and saw heaven open, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Sounds a lot like what Ezekiel's saying, from the time that I was youth. I have not defiled myself in that way. And so Peter says, No, I'm not going to do it. I've never done it, and I'm not going to. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice. And the vessel was received up again into heaven. And so here, of course, Pete talks about Peter, wondering what in the world that means. But, this picnic comes down. And it's all these things that they were not supposed to eat ceremonial. You know, things that were unclean and they just couldn't eat. And God says, hey, Peter, rise and kill it and eat it. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. 3 times this happens. 3 times God says, listen, don't call unclean what I've cleansed. And the point behind what he's saying here is not so much about the food. I enjoy eating those foods. I personally don't have a problem with that. Some people do. But the point is not the food. The point is the salvation of the Gentiles. That's another thing. You know, what I've called clean, and God had said, hey, the door of salvation is open to them. You know, don't call dirty and unclean what I've called clean. And so the point was the Gentiles could be saved, but he uses this as an illustration. And then, of course, you have this 1 Corinthians chapter number 8. We don't have time to turn there now, but you can just write that down and turn to it yourself and look into it. 1 Corinthians 8, where the Apostle Paul has this dialogue about meat being offered to idols. He said it's not a big deal. Idols are nothing, and so it's not a big deal. But if it were to cause my brother to offend, then I will eat no meat while the world stands. He wanted to make sure that he didn't trip up his brother or sister and their walk with God. And so just a little detour from what we see here. But he says, it hasn't happened. You know, I've never eaten this kind of stuff from the time that I was a little child. Then he said unto me, so here's God's response. He says, lo, I have given thee cow's dung for man's dung, and thou shalt prepare thy bread therewith. So he gets a little bit of reprieve, not much. Instead of using human waste, you can use cattle waste, which is a practice of the Bedouins and peoples like them even today, because they don't have wood, they don't have the forest to go chop things down, and so they mix the cattle dung with straw, and they kind of make little fire bricks so that they can start their fires and different things like that. And so he says, that's what I want you to use. Still would pollute the food, still ceremonially unclean. But the point God's making is, listen, this is not about ceremonial uncleanness or cleanness. This is about survival. And, you know, I enjoy watching some of these shows about survival. You know, they go into the wilderness and you know, run different scenarios or whatever else. Man, the stuff they eat, I would die in a heartbeat, I'm telling you. Because I'm not going to eat maggots and whatever else, different things that they eat. And he said, but it's about survival. If it came down to survival, I probably would. But I haven't ever been in that circumstance. I can go quite a while without something if I have to. But he says, moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem, and they shall eat bread by weight and with care, and they shall drink water by measure and with astonishment, that they may want bread and water and be astonished one with another and consume away for their iniquity. Now, a staff is something that we lean on for support. He says, I'm going to take away the staff of bread. You're not going to be able to just go out and freely eat bread and drink water however you want to. He said, we're going to eat bread by weight. In other words, it's going to be rationed out. Just as he told him, I want you to measure out about approximately 8 ounces of bread you're going to eat every day, 1.5 pints of water. The time's going to come where you're not going to be able to just eat whatever you want to. It's going to be rationed out. You're going to have to be very careful about how much food you consume every day to try to make your food supply last as long as possible before you starve to death. But as you get this picture of a siege here, he says they are going to consume away for their iniquity. And you're not going to be able to look at them and see somebody who's healthy. You can look at them and see they got some meat on their bones, they've got something to them. You're going to literally watch them waste away for their iniquity. And probably every single person here has seen pictures of children and others who are starving to death in third world nations. So that's what's going to happen to you. Because of your sin, you are going to waste away. And he called Ezekiel here to act out these pictures for them to see with their eyes. God wants to make sure that they are without excuse. He's going to warn them. He's not just going to send somebody who's going to speak something. You're going to see it with your eyes. And if you don't accept the message, and if you don't get it, it's your own fault. You don't heed the warning, that's your problem. But I have pictured it out here and declared it for you. And the same is true for each of us. You know, we've got God's Word in front of us. We ought to be studying. We ought to be learning it. We ought to be applying it to our lives and practicing what this book says. If I'm not, it's my fault. It's not the pastor's fault. He ought to be doing his part. I ought to be doing my part to teach and preach what the Bible says. But when it all boils down to it, my pastor didn't tell me, is not going to hold up. God's going to say, listen, didn't you have a copy of the Bible? Probably a bunch of copies of the Bible. Why didn't you study it? Why didn't you flesh it out? That's going to be what it's about. And the same is true here for the children of Israel. I gave you the message. I even put it in something that you can look at and watch and see. And yet many of them would not heed the warning. Let's let that not be true of us as well.